Thank you so much, Joni, and thank you for Ethos for the sponsorship of this presentation, and for the folks who are participating live, and or those who are watching this recorded presentation. Thank you for investing your time. This is going to be a very valuable presentation because we'll be focusing on project cost forecasting, which is the collection of information from the field on where you are on your project, that coupled with what you've actually spent and what you're anticipating making is the cornerstone to cash flow, and also work in progress reporting, which of course is very desirable by lending institutions. Certainly surety companies love this sort of thing, where project cost forecasting, real life information is tied to your work in progress. So we'll be touching upon that. And this is an educational presentation, so we'll talk about what's in Sage 300 Construction Real Estate to utilize in these ways, and then of course how Office Connector can make that streamlined and allow you to more completely leverage the experience. So some of this I may be covering and you may not be familiar with, in which case you have option to reach out to your consultant. We have a lot of great consultants here and that for you to reach out to, and who can give you a lot more information as to what's possible with Sage 300 Construction Real Estate. Most people really have the system underutilized, and I think that'll become apparent in some of the things that I show you. What I show you today is leveraging technology that's very broadly used. There's over 3,000 companies out there that have made the investment in acquiring Office Connector. That's over 10,000 concurrent uses. Now, every Sage customer has Office Connector installed, and they get a few templates that are called starter templates, but what we'll be focusing on is the fully functional technology where it can do considerably more for you and really truly drive work processes. And what we've heard from folks is the reason this is so broadly utilized when people make the investment and to understand is because Excel-based types of solutions are easy to set up, learn, and use. It's leveraging your knowledge of Excel. But it's much, much more than Excel. Using this technology turns Excel into one of the most powerful data management and analysis reporting business intelligence tools that you could have. So it overcomes the limitations in Excel that are there, that people say, you know, why are we using Excel? This overcomes those objections and then opens up the full functionality of Excel to do everything it could possibly do for you, which is a lot more than what most people think about. It's all about saving time, which is going to be money for you, or allow you to accomplish mission critical tasks to run your business when you might have less people. You know, if they're out for illness or whatever other purpose that may be out there, your ability to accomplish more in less time, that's what we're after. And really that's what you're going to see when you utilize this technology. So this slide showcases, actually the little screenshot back there is a cost forecast report. Notice it's already formatted. It's got columns, one that's yellow, and it's got information in there. And so when you populate data into Excel, from inside of Excel using Office Connector, you're using the query capability. And there are different license types for query, and we'll talk about those here in a moment. But if I were going to send data back so that I did not have to retype it, why would you want to handle information more than one time? When you do that, it's time consuming, you introduce the possibility of errors. But if it's secured and honors Sage's rules, then the ability to write or import to get the data back into Sage with the click of a button is a huge time saver. And we'll touch upon that in how we talk about forecasting and getting the data back into Sage. We'll touch upon those. We won't take a deep dive, but if you want to have a more in-depth knowledge of any of these things, there are recorded presentations that we have all the way up to Sage's presentations, and they offer online presentations on Office Connector, very informative every month. So there are those recorded that dive deep into these areas. When we talk about query, there is another aspect to it, and that is when it comes to doing financial reporting in Excel, it's not simply a matter of reaching into the tables in Sage and just pulling the data into Excel, because a financial is a derivative process. Almost everything else is to some extent derivative, but not as much as a financial, where if I say I'm running a financial for, a year ago or 3 years ago or 5 years ago, I have to calculate what the amounts are for each of my business entities, and for the different accounts. And so to do that, it requires special functionality, and that's the Office Center financial functionality. Again, there's recorded presentation on financials. We won't go into that here today, but we want you to be aware. Okay, so these are the products that are part of the Office Connector product suite. These are Sage products, just like Job Cost is a Sage product, or Payroll, or Report Designer. This is a Sage product, Office Connector, and it has 3 product families, if you will: Query, Write, and Import. Query is licensed either as a concurrent use of a designer license or a standard license. The designer has the same functionality as standard, it just also has more. So people might have 1 or 2 designers, but the majority of the people probably are just refreshing workbooks, so they would be using standard functionality. And then if you've got financials, it just extends the functionality of all the query, assuming the person has the right to see that kind of data in Sage, which is controlled by Sage's security. So that's the query. Write, if you chose to write information in, that would be similar to if I was entering data on a screen, like a job setup or maintaining user fields or whatever, checkboxes, vendors, customers, employees. That's the write capability. There's a designer for that allows you to create new capability, and then the standard capability. And really, I'll be using mostly standard functionality in my examples because they're already there. They're part of Office Connector, the ones I'll be using today. But import is another aspect, and that is to get detail in. So detail would be something I would manually enter, like an invoice and accounts payable or receivables or payroll time. I would enter that into an entry screen, and import is another way of getting detail in. So you don't have to manually enter it, like an estimate. Miscellaneous worksheets, which is what we'll leverage here in this presentation, that's a capability of importing that detail. Rather than going in and manually entering miscellaneous worksheets, there is an import feature that allows you to do that. So that's an explanation of the products there. The Query Designer, it's easy to use to evolve a report. I may use it to an extent to demonstrate where data is, in more simplistic ways, to help you conceptually realize maybe what a controller or a CFO might do with like WIP information. Because oftentimes there's data that's in Sage, but there could be other information you want on a work in progress report, and it's not reflected in Sage yet, but you want to be able to have it on the report. And I'll show you how to do something like that. It's pretty easy. So, and I'm not going to talk about financials, but we are going to focus on this. And we want to first look at how Sage handles project forecasting and WIP, and then how Office Connector can improve that experience. And then, of course, how field information will benefit a work in progress report. I mean, really, all you have to do is, if this presentation was seen by a surety or bonding company, they would say, oh yeah, you need that. They love this. At Construction Financial Management Association meetings, surety companies love this sort of a thing. And really operations should love it as well, and finance. It really brings everything together. So the first thing I'm going to do, though, as I said, is talk a little bit about Sage and what's possible. And going into the job cost, I already have the application launched. I want to show you a couple of things that are in here. So, under job cost, I can go into setup and I can set up a job. And then under a job, I may have extras, but regardless, I'll have cost codes. So that's how a job is broken into pieces, right? I enter an estimate, and here I have a group cost code. I have a group and then all the little items underneath it, and another group and another group. And that's how I have this chart of account set up. Now yours may or may not look like this. It just depends. But this is from people who are not construction centric. It's like a general ledger, but for jobs, right? Instead of accounts, they're cost codes. And I have these cost codes broken out, but they're really for operational perspective. How am I going to build the job? And when I set up a cost code and categories underneath it, I will typically have an estimate of what I think it will cost. So this cost code, I think it will cost that much. It came from estimating. So when you did an estimate, maybe that's how you got the job if you were a bid related person. That's what I think it'll cost. Then I put in my actuals, right? Now I can over here have change orders, legitimate change orders, but as this persists here, that's my actual cost going forward. Well, some people will say, take your job to date cost divided by your estimate, and that's your percent complete. That is not your percent complete. That's your percent of dollars spent or something, but it's not percent complete. Percent complete is a status you have to know by looking at the job, someone who knows what they're doing. And that's part of what we want to get to. And there's a place for that here on the job. See here, there are these fields, and they're called miscellaneous worksheet fields. And they can have how much it will cost to complete. So regardless of what my job date cost or my estimate is, how much is it going to cost on top of what my existing job date cost to complete? Or what's my cost at completion? For people who do self-perform work, maybe it's labor hours to go. And I'm at a cost code level. Some people will do their forecasting at that level. Some people will come all the way down here to the category level. So categories are underneath cost codes, right? So there's equipment is a category, and labor, and there's labor burden. And labor burden or overtime labor, they may be all of type labor, meaning they accumulate as one of these types. These are cost types here. So this is a category level. A construction management company probably wouldn't even look at these. You know, maybe they would. General contractors might, especially if they self-perform. Subcontractors, definitely. This is a lot of where you keep track of your costs is at this level. And I would still have my cost and my estimate, you know, and then my miscellaneous worksheets at this level. So part of this is to determining what level am I going to capture my progress. I've got my costs coming in through accounts payable and job costs, direct costs, and payroll and whatever else, but how am I going to track my progress? So that's what this is all about, a work in progress. So a work in progress is normally a report that looks at each job and will look at those pieces of information to give you an idea of where you're at, right? And there would be reports here on the menu, but I'm going to go out and show you an Office Connector report for WIP work in progress. So if I come right down here, let's see, I just want to make sure I don't already have it running here. Okay, so this is a work in progress report that's on the Launchpad, meaning if you made an investment in Office Connector, just query standard even, you would be able to run this report. So when I generate it from the template, I'll have a workbook, and it tells you here on the first page how to use it. But this is a date-driven one. So I can come in here and put in as of date and the period end date and status I want to include, jobs of a certain status or type. I can, for contract amounts, use estimates for my contract amount if I wanted. You know, I can exclude things. This report has a lot of capability. And I have sample data, so these are values that will work. And when I hit refresh right here, I will get a report. This report here, this WIP report, will get filled out. Currently, there's nothing in here, but see how it's formatted? So that's a big difference. This is vastly different than pushing a report into Excel and then having to manipulate it, and it's all static. With this, I hit refresh, and the data is current as of right now when it's done refreshing, and it accumulated as of those cutoff dates. So this is a work in progress with cutoff dates. And I've got a lot of columns. I've got my job, and I can expand these. See, so it shows me the job type and the prefix. Maybe I have different types of work that my company does. And I've got these, you know, contract, original, approved, and revised. But I'm using Excel's grouping to show only the information I want. And if I want to get into more, like specifically what's in here for the estimate, then I can do so. And it's all just Excel, right? So I've got that, and I've got my billings for my contract. Some folks who use the system, like a developer, might not bill anybody, right? Because they're billing something maybe for themselves. But for many people, they have they're billing whoever is paying them, or a bank or something. And then here's my cost, this period and the total prior period. Now you could add other things to this, the amount of cost this year and the amount of cost in prior years. That's just another column you could have added. This report is pretty sophisticated, so if you wanted to add something, I probably would engage a consultant, say what you want. You can most cost effectively get it that way, I think. And most importantly, because this has drill down. So if I look at this and I look at the cost and I say, well, that cost right there doesn't look right. Well, I would have to run a report. And then you could go, like in job cost, if you ran a WIP report and you wanted to see the detail, you'd have to come here and run another report, right? Well, why do that? It's the year 2020. You should just be able to, like, say, I want to know this, and you just click on it and you see the detail right now, real time. And there you go. That's drill down. So Office Center has drill down. So all of this you would get just with a standard license. It's really affordable. A standard license costs less than what someone who goes to Starbucks would pay probably in a few months, but certainly in a year. It's very affordable, and it gives you a lot of this capability. So this is a WIP report, but there are columns here that like percent earned, that are calculated based on the cost and the estimate. And so maybe I want to have my percent earned based on the status of the job in the field. So I have a different column. Maybe I have the percent calculated based on the percent of the estimate, but I have another one which is representing my percent complete. So I really know what my basis for earned value and billings in excess and cost in excess would be, right? And I can put notes. So this is a starting point. Doesn't have to be the ending point, but it's something you can use immediately. There are other reports on here, but I want to look at forecasting for a moment to see how that would feed this. And this part here, I've had people call this a forecast. Most people, usually it's a work in progress, but I've also had people call what I'm about to show you a work in progress. And I'm trying to align on names. So we've talked about how do I give current information to the field and get information from them. And ideally, you're giving them something useful that they can use, so they're more inclined to do it. And then they provide you back useful information. Lots of your peers are doing this. And you may be doing it, maybe not as efficiently. When I first started, I've been doing this for 35 years, people would print a report and they would then give it to someone, and they would have to write in the amounts, assuming they ever did. And then you would come here and you'd enter miscellaneous worksheets. The accounting person would come here, they'd pick something like cost at completion or cost to complete or whatever, and they'd pick a job, right? They'd come in here and they'd say what date it was for, and they'd fill this out from the sheet that they were given. Other people, they wanted the operational people to fill this out, but the operational people are looking at this and thinking, well, it kind of looks like Excel, but it's not. I'm not seeing enough information to really know what's in the system, so I can tell you what isn't in the system that you should know about. So people wanted more than this. Well, if you took the time to enter this, the benefit to you is that when you put in values here for cost to complete and it calculates cost at completion, when you hit finish, transactions are created. And those transactions show the progress of this information as the job progresses. So it's very valuable. However, if you don't manually enter it here, it can be time consuming. Some people choose instead to use what ODBC, Open Database Connectivity, and they just write directly over these amounts. So they have a sheet outside of Sage and it just replaces that value. Well, the drawback to the accounting person is you don't have any detail behind that number, right? So consequently, most people would want to manually enter it, but not happily because it's time consuming. Why would you manually enter something that you don't have to? Is there a better way? Yes, there's a better way. So I'm going to show you two forecasting examples. There are several on the Office Center Launchpad. These are the most current, the most sophisticated, the most useful ones. The first one I'm going to show you is at the cost code level. And then I'll show you one at the category level. They're very similar. So again, the information page would explain to you how to use it, right? There's a sheet here that where you're setting up how you're going to send data back into Sage, assuming you choose to do it. I would. Why would you not? I mean, I can't. People who don't do this, I just scratch my head. It's like, you must just not understand, because why would you do it otherwise? Certainly not manually. So I would say that use the create transactions like if you manually entered them, but use Office Center import miscellaneous worksheets to create the transactions for you. Now you don't have to enter them. And then you can tell it where the forecast information is going to go. And we'll fill this out in a second once you see the next sheet. Now, this has the ability to generate this report off of the master file totals, which can be as of the end of a month or whatever, but some people want to run it off a transaction date, like everything through the 20th of the prior month or whatever. It's whatever you choose. You pick the option for you, and then that's how you'll use it. And then you'll come in here and you'll pick one of your jobs. And I'm going to pick one, and then you just hit refresh. That's it, and it does it all for you. Now, I've had people look at this. We've been doing this kind of thing for years, and people have spent a lot of money and time trying to build something like this that drives a process. This will do it for you. It's amazing. So this is showing me all my cost codes that are in Sage and what my current amounts are. So it's like the work in progress. It's just more detailed. Some people do call this a work in progress, but it's really, in Australia, they call it a quantity survey. And here in the US, usually it's a project cost forecast. So now people will often want different columns, but these definitely are useful. They'll look at the commitments if they have them. Now if you self-perform, there's probably missing information, and you'll like the next one I'm going to show you. But here I've got my actual costs as of right now in Sage, right? So it's all formatted and current as of right now. See right here, it says as of, right? Because that's the date I did this. And now I can pick my forecasting method. So I could say, I want to put in cost to complete, right? So I'm going to hit, well, actually I could just type this in there. So it's $14,000. I have an estimate of $57,000, but I happen to know that it's going to be $42,000 to complete this. Now, right? So maybe I have a winning thing. The cost at completion is going to be less than the estimate. And so I say, cost savings from, whatever. Some kind of an explanation. These values are useless if you don't know what the person was thinking. So a head of operations would want to see that. And if I'm a project manager, I'd probably want my notes. So I can come down here and excavate and backfill. I could say, we're already over budget, and I'm expecting to have 5,000 more costs. So now I have a cost overrun, and I explain myself here. Well, now I can collaborate and maybe figure this out. So I fill all this out. But let's say there were some rows that you didn't want to do cost to complete. Maybe you sub the thing out. So if I expand this, I can change my forecast method by row. So I could say, well, we don't do the steel work, so I'm going to say I want to put in a percent complete. And so now I'll put in the percent complete, and it'll calculate based on that. I can do that row by row. Okay, so then if I scroll all the way down, I got a total, and I can go on. So let's say they fill this out, and this is as of September. Now you want to put it back into Sage. Now you could take this and put it up on one screen and manually enter this into Sage. But why would you do that when you could come here and just hit a button? I mean, let's think about it. Now, if you're going to send it into Sage, we need to know what miscellaneous worksheet field. So I say cost to complete is going into that one, and cost at completion goes here, and my variance is, I'm going to put it in there. So these are those miscellaneous worksheet fields that you would do the same thing inside of Sage if you were doing it. And if you want to know more about this, have a conversation with your consultant, because now when I hit send values, that data will be in Sage. It will create the entries into Sage for those cost codes. You just click that button, the entries will get created. It uses the use of job costs for a moment while it creates the entries, because there's a program, job cost program, that actually creates the entries, and then they're in Sage. So now what would you do? Well, I would have generated the workbook and given it to an operation person. They would have filled this out. I would have looked at it and said, yep, it's good, and hit the send values. Now, the next time they're going to do their forecast, when they hit refresh here, it's October. So I'll have another sheet that will appear for October, but my September sheet will still be here. So if you've been doing this project since January, you'll have January, February, March, April, May, all of the prior forecasts, all in one workbook. And an operational head, oh my God, they love that. But an surety company, they would be going nuts, because that's transparency. It's like, my risks are lower and I can see how you're managing your job. So this automates that process. What you do is you generate a workbook. After you generated it, you'd hit, file, and you'd save it, and you'd put it into a folder. Maybe on your network, you have a folder for forecast, and below it for each project manager, and maybe each project gets saved in there. So you would save a job workbook for every active project, and then you just open it up and the person would do their forecasting. They should be doing it now anyway. They're just probably doing it in some tedious, time-consuming way. This is automated. So when I write that data back, when I click that button, it's now in Sage. And I can then use that in my work in progress report. Now I want to show you, this is a cost code level one, right? But what if you wanted to do it off the category? So this is a different one. These are both come with Sage. You get these as part of getting Office Center. Now, if you only had Office Center Standard, you could refresh this. You could not send the data back. You'd have to manually enter it. You get either write or import. We recommend import miscellaneous worksheets. But I would again come here and fill out. If people ask me, should I write or import? I'm going to tell you import. Why would you not import and have the transactional data? That would not be, I don't think, smart. But now remember, on the cost category, there are 4 fields, and you want to talk to your consultant before you do this. Don't just watch this video, whoever you are out there watching, and then just make changes to your Sage. And then don't do that. Just talk to the consultant, make sure you have a plan, because you want to be able to take the data, put it into Sage, and then utilize it. It's not a lot of time, it's just working smart. And then it'll all be automated. So there's my little evangelism I'm giving you. So I could pick that my forecast amount is going to go into miscellaneous amount 1, 2, and 3, let's say. Now these values are going to be on each category, and then they'll accumulate up. So you see the total of all your categories at the cost code, and you'll see the total of every category on the job at the job level. And that will be where you could pull it right into your WIP report if you want. So you pick your method here, you pick your job. I'm going to use the same job. I hit refresh. And now I have one, but it's at the category level. And there are people who have, like, they want the categories across the top and whatever. You can have something made custom for you that works whatever way you want. This is ready to go. If you're not doing it, if you're not doing forecasting, just try to use the ones that are there and start doing it and have it done and have backup and have it feed your WIP. Then evolve it, right? But it's a game changer. So these are your categories. And if I said, normally I do cost to complete, but if labor right here, I self-perform it. So I want to do labor is hours to complete. And then I put how many hours to go. I can look at how many hours are expended and put in hours to go. This database, the sample data, it's not really set up for self-perform work. The math doesn't work out, right? There has to be a unit price that you would multiply it by. But anyway, but yours would work. If you self-perform, then this will, of course, work for you. So you fill it out, each row, the way you want. And again, you're coming here and you're clicking send the data into Sage. So now it's in Sage, it's accumulated up, and I can then add it to my my work in progress reports. So I want to stop now and check in with the folks and see if there's any questions, because I covered a lot of ground, let's just face it, in a small amount of time. And so I'm going to breathe for a moment. Joni, any questions from the folks? You may be muted.
I don't see any in the chat box, James.
Okay, very good. Well, then let me just make an assumption that if I hit send the values, where are they in Sage, right? I've used this workbook, so where are the values in Sage? And there's something else I want to cover, and that is this capability of having, I got my estimate, I got my actuals, and then there's this other thing, which Sage calls miscellaneous worksheets. And it's part of Sage. It's always been a part of Sage. And they're in here. Now, I've told you that they can be named. So if I come here to set up on the category, let's say you self-perform, and I come back here, see how these they just called miscellaneous 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So I can name those fields, and you'd have to have the right level of security to do this. You can't just do it willy-nilly. But in custom descriptions, I can come down and find that field. So the job cost category, right? I'm looking at the job cost category, and I want the miscellaneous.
Hey, James, I do have a question now.
Beg your pardon?
I do have a question now from Aaron. He said, when sending to Sage, do all other users need to be out of Sage?
No. When you click send to Sage, essentially you're automating. So when I was a programmer at Timberline, which became Sage 300 Construction Real Estate, and then I was in support. But when I was a programmer, the kind of thing I did were these user interfaces, okay? When you go and you look at something here, or if you go to tasks and you're going to enter something. So this is an entry screen. I'm in job cost, right? Right now I'm using the use of job cost, and I come in here and I hit list. So if I came in here and entered this in here, could other people be in job cost? And the answer is yes. If you have more than one concurrent use of job cost, they can. Right now, how long will it take me to manually enter all that data from all those jobs? A while, and then I have to run a report to make sure I did it right. So I'm using the use all that time. That's if I manually did it. Now, when you import something, you're still using the use of job cost. You're just not using this entry screen. You used Excel as your entry screen. Okay, so let's say you were a programmer like I was, and you put in a job, right? And you came in here and you put in a date and you put in these amounts. When you hit finish, after you've put values in here, when you hit finish, right before you hit finish, it's nowhere. It's just in this new file, right? It's not even saved yet. But when you hit finish, it would then, ideally, it would post. Your new transactions go to current, and these values would update your category and so on and so forth. I'm assuming everyone here would know that. Okay, so this, when I hit finish, there's a program that runs, designed by a different programmer than the ones who do these entry screens. And that program will look at what the entry screens have to offer, and it will determine, yeah, this is good. What the heck do you do here? You know, reject this, whatever. But it's a program that reads what you typed in here. Okay, so for everything other than miscellaneous worksheets, under tools and import, I can import what I could otherwise type. So here I could import estimates, but I could also enter them right here. Okay, so if I entered estimates and I put a bunch in there, when I finish, a program runs and it posts to job cost. That is the same program that, well, very similar program that runs when you go into here and you fill this thing out right here and you hit start. A program runs and it reads what you're offering, and if it's correct, it will put it into Sage. That's what the program does. The same kind of program will work for miscellaneous worksheets. It's part of job cost. It's job cost transaction services specifically. So People can be in jobs, no problem whatsoever. That's called convergence. If someone was like had a job open and I tried to enter a transaction to it, you could still enter a transaction to it. What will happen is if the record was locked, the transaction potentially could reject and stay in the new file, right? Or it does actually update, but when someone's in the entry screen, when they leave, then if they went back in, they would see it. Those are the two levels of what's called convergence management that programs use. So that's probably more than what most people want to know, but that's how the software works. So you're using the use of job costs, but people can actually be in job costs doing other things. Now, when you write to a record, that's not necessarily the case. Convergence on writing is usually a little bit different because you're directly writing to the same thing that somebody else could change. So it often will lock the record and prevent the writing from taking place, but that would not impact import, which is what's happening here. That's a good question. I bet you consultants don't know that. Not probably at that depth anyway. They probably don't want to know it at that depth. But there you go. So that's what's happening when I come in here. Now I want to show you something that, and I'll just point it out. Like a consultant, everybody should kind of know this, but if not, so let's say you said I wanted to come in here and miscellaneous worksheets. I want to enter them at the category level, because you can use miscellaneous worksheets for more than what I'm talking about. I'm only talking about cost forecasting, how much cost to complete, hours to go, cost at completion. But there are other things you could use miscellaneous worksheets for. What's another thing that people use miscellaneous worksheets for? At the job level, finance people will say, what is my expected cost and revenue by month for the next 2 years or 3 years? It's like a pro forma or whatever, right? It's like a financial forecast. People do that. They do it in Excel. I bet most finance people are doing that, and they're doing it a lot more difficult than it would be to do it with Office Connector. There is a template in Office Connector that allows you to do that at the job level. Put in your forecast for 2-3 years out or whatever, and it will write it in there, and it's pretty useful. We could do another presentation on that, but it would still leverage miscellaneous worksheets. It's just using it differently. But what we're doing here is leveraging it to get in either the category amounts that accumulate up or the cost code amounts. So I showed you the category, and you saw that there were miscellaneous worksheet fields. There were 4. If I go to the cost code, okay, there are miscellaneous worksheet fields. These are the 4 from all the categories below this cost code, right? This cost code could have 3 or 4 categories, assuming you use them, and the total for all of them would be right here. This is the amount for this specific cost code, right? They're different. Now, if you said, James, what's the transaction type for this right here? I'd say miscellaneous amount 1. And you'd say, oh, that's interesting. What's the transaction type for this one? And I'd say miscellaneous amount 1. And you go, oh, really? They both have the same transaction type? I go, yeah, but there's rules that this one has a cost code but no category. This one has a category. So that's how Sage knows the difference between different miscellaneous worksheet fields. That may be more information than you want, but it's not hard to understand. If you kind of see it and you talk about it, you'll get it. And it's worth understanding because you can use this in so many ways. It's probably the most powerful part of Sage that's way underutilized. So if I came all the way up here to the job level, now I'm at the very highest level inside of job costs, right? Tables accumulate at this level. So if I look at amount right here, what am I seeing? This is like when I set up a job, I see this, and here's the statuses and check boxes and when I'm supposed to start and all that stuff. By the way, this can also be maintained from outside in a worksheet for jobs or cost codes or categories, your statuses. That could be, otherwise you have to manually go in here and change them. And then some people don't do that, and you should be doing it. So with Office Connector, you could end up making a lot better use of Sage than what you historically have. So there's all these screens, that where you're setting things up, compliance, and then you get to these accumulated totals. Now you can't just change this total. This is an accumulation of entries made that are accumulated up, right? And then these are the receivables, and there's my estimates, if I enter an estimate. There's my cost total, right? And then I see all these different things, but down here I have miscellaneous worksheet totals. So look at all, I got more than I had even at the cost code. I've got my 4 from all the categories. So this represents every category that's on the job that doesn't have an extra. If you don't know what extras are, I'll leave that to your consultant to explain. There, you'll find duplication screens for the job, and then the ones that pertain to extras, right? They'll have the word extra, and you add them both together if you use extras to get the total for your job. But anyway, this is all the categories for cost codes that aren't associated with extras. This is all the cost code miscellaneous worksheets that are not associated with extras on the job, accumulated all the way up. I can pull this out right into a report. But these are job level ones. And CFOs often will utilize these for what I just described to you, that projecting the cost out over 2 or 3 years and the receivables or whatever you want to do. They'll use these. They'll rename them, and then they'll make use of them. And you could enter these values under miscellaneous worksheets, but it's quite tedious. Very simple with Office Center. So anyway, so this is the source of that information that you would then pull onto a report. Now these reports, if you wanted them on these reports, you have to look at the design. These all have a recipe. Think of it as a recipe. If you said, hey, this bread didn't rise, well, did the recipe have yeast? Probably not going to rise. So, each report has a recipe, but Office Center reports can also be here on your menu, or they can be in your subfolders, or there's lots of ways to access your Office Center, your Excel reports. So if I come out here to this job level forecast, right, or this is a cost code level, when I put these values in and I write them back, these values, right, will be represented on the table that I showed you, all the way up here at the job, right? If I came in here and wrote those values in there, then I would see the total. The detail would be in my transactions, but the total will be right, where is it? Right there, right? So it would be cost to complete, prospect. That's how these got in there, right? Of me writing them before. Well, this can be pulled onto a WIP report, or it could be, or it could have been accumulated from transactions. So how would I do something? Now I'm going to show you something with a designer from a WIP work in progress standpoint that I would do a little bit more than this, but I just want to show you something that's possible. Okay. So this is a different WIP. This is the one that's been out there for years. It doesn't have a cutoff date. It's also very easy to customize. So I'm using it. The other one is more difficult because it does so much more. So here I've got all these totals, and I've got my percent earned and earned contract. But see here, what if I didn't want this? I want to put in what's my cost at completion, or cost to complete. So I'm going to insert a column, and I'm going to say, cost at completion. Now I'm going to and then you wouldn't have any yellow background or whatever, or maybe you would, I don't know. But this was, if you used forecast, this is in Sage, right? The transactions were created if you used the example I did. So if you didn't use transactions, if you just wrote it, then maybe you'd use a query formula. You'd look up the cost at completion value, the miscellaneous worksheet value. But if you use transactions, you might sum up the amount, right? And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to sum up the transactions. Now, this is not the most efficient way. You can do it, it'll work, but there's faster ways to have it accumulate all the detail from a transaction table. But this will work. So I've had people do this and say, I did this, but it took X amount of time to update. And I'll go, yeah, and I said in the presentation, there is a better way. So just learn how to do it so it will run faster. You can learn it. It's not hard. It's just something that you don't know maybe. So I want the amount off the transactions that got created. When I imported, transactions got created. So I want the amount. Then I tell it what transaction. So I know that for this row, it's job equals the value in A10. So $A10. Right, I know that. Now I'm going to add another condition that the transaction type equals. So here I have to know what my transaction types are. Where did I put in cost to complete, cost at completion? Because they're just going to be called miscellaneous 1, 2, 3, 4. So cost to complete is, I think, 2, and cost at completion is 3. This, your consultant would know, and you may know, but you can figure this out. It's just, you pick whatever it is, right? Now, if I use job level miscellaneous worksheets for other things like my pro forma, then I don't want to use the job level ones. So at this point, let's say I accumulated off the category. I would add another condition that the category is not equal to blank. So that if there's a category and it's a miscellaneous worksheet 1 or 2 or whatever, it'll accumulate, right? Or I'll say the cost code is not equal to blank, right? But the category is equal to blank. So if the cost code is not blank, I know it's at a cost code or a category level miscellaneous worksheet. If the category is blank, for sure it's a cost code level. That is the exact condition you use right there. And if you wanted miscellaneous 2, 3, 4, just you change the amounts. Not hard. If I showed you in detail, we had more time, this would be understandable, and you'd know more about about job cost and Sage, and and generally. So at this point, if I had, now I could put a cutoff date. I'm not going to, but because this is not a cutoff date generated one, but I'm just going to do that and see here, it accumulated it. There's my formula. There's my amount. I copy it down. So this is the amount. I've only done forecasting on one job. You'd have more things. So that came from the field. So now I say, okay, well, that's interesting. That's the cost at completion for everything. That includes my job to date costs or whatever. I could have pulled cost to complete and calculated it, but I could say, I'm going to say the cost at completion is, I'll say, I'm winging this, right? Because I'm kind of making it up as I go. So I'm going to say this equals if $V10 is not equal to 0, then $V10. Use the amount that the project manager gave. Otherwise, $N10, the total estimate. So now I've got my cost at completion either way. It's either that, or if that's blank, it uses the other one. So some formula, right? Whatever it is. So this is what came from either detail in the system or what the project managers gave or whatever. So now let's say I'm a CFO and I say there is cost, cost not in job cost, right? My burden. So I go, oh, well, there's $45,000 there and whatever. Like the project managers will say, what? That's not on my job. Well, it is. So and then I can have another formula, which is my total, and then calculate my percents based on my CFO adjusted rates or whatever. That's how easy it is. It is that easy. Now, to make it up, the date cutoff report, what I would do is I would just say, here are my formulas, and I'd have a consultant change it. It wouldn't take them long, and you're done. But or learn how to build these accumulations using SQL, right? There's the advanced training. There's all these training classes, the advanced ones. There's only like 8 of them, but they're an hour and a half long. But it will teach you how to accumulate amounts so that the reports will run fast. Anyway, maybe that's a little bit more detailed than people wanted, but it is recorded. So, all right, I think we're getting out of time. So I just want to get back to what we were talking about here. So we've talked about various products. I primarily showed the standard license of query. I didn't show write, although I could have written, and I used an import feature for job miscellaneous worksheets. That's what I used. I also used a query designer to build something. When I accumulated those amounts for like the CFO, I used a query designer. Not everybody would use that. So that's a slide on financials, just so you know what it does. It's a lot, probably more powerful function than any of the others. This is a process you could engage with. I would say contact your consultants and professional services and identify kind of what you want to accomplish, and we can collectively come up with the best plan or give you one-on-one consulting so you could do it. And you just email support at ETHOSystems.com and to get started. So that's on this slide. These are these training classes that you can sign up for to learn the software. They're 90 minutes, they're recorded, and you get a chance to elevate your expertise. So it's a lot less time than it would take to master something like Crystal. And here's for questions, contact Tony here or professional services